Today, I decided to visit your grave. I've visited you enough times for you to know that I am once more in a confusing place in my life. You see, in a few days, I will be doing my oath-taking to become an American citizen. You always wanted Filipinos to belong to America. Now that I am receiving this certificate of belongingness, I somehow feel I owe it all to you. I find it incredible that I feel so much affinity towards you. We don't come from the same province or even the same time. Why then do I still seek advice from your writings? Maybe it's because, even though our material realities have changed through the decades, our hopes have never faltered. This is that thing we both share, this westward longing, this dream. I first read your book in college over 5 years ago in a post-colonial studies class. You couldn't have lived in a more different time than now. You were born to a poor peasant family during the end of Spanish times and the beginning of American colonization. There was great hope and great despair. What was first thought of as the overthrow of the Spanish oppressors became a mere passing down of titles. But to tell the truth, I didn't understand the relevance of your story back then. I was light-skinned, privileged, painfully middle class, and your rural life seemed oceans away from mine. For me, the American period was long over, and the Filipino people were free in this great, globalized world. I was happy in my carefree little bubble of Metro Manila. 5 years ago was the most exciting time for me. I not only witnessed, but also took part in this nationwide project to rebuild Philippine cinema. I dreamed of making great films for my homeland. Then, halfway through my last semester, my father's business went bankrupt. I was obliged to let go of my personal goals and help my family. So I stopped school to work at a call center. I had to change a lot of things, like my accent and my body clock. Thus, I became an exile of time, living in the Philippines and yet working in US Central Standard Time. Outsourced call centers had fast become the convenient, relatively well-paying employer of choice for those who can't find jobs relevant to their degrees. Compared to your life, though, I can't complain. You could barely afford to cultivate your narrow strip of land, and even that was eventually taken away from you. So even before you went to America, you had already been a migrant worker, traveling from town to town, looking for odd jobs, just so you could help your family. Farther and farther away you went. Before long, you were on that sick, sad ship traversing the ocean towards this search for a door into America. I still envy how easily you got here. You were neither immigrant nor citizen, but you had a US passport, no visa needed. Sometimes I wish that we had remained a US territory, maybe even a state, because my visa took a decade to process. You see, my mother left us for America when we were young, and it took many years and a lot of money to petition me and my brothers. Just when I had given up, I finally received my visa before my 21st birthday, and so I found myself embarking on the same pilgrimage you took. Outside the airport, I hugged my father goodbye, but admittedly, I was more excited than sad. Here I was, finally going to the land of Hollywood, of the dollar, of freedom. I felt so lucky to have been given a chance to go to America. I had begun to imagine for myself the life I was about to lead, one of limitless resources, boundless creativity, and fulfilled promises. I landed in Seattle on a summer day. It was so different from Manila, and exactly how it looked like in the movies. Like you, I felt like I was coming home after a long voyage. How funny it is to immediately feel at home in America the first time you set foot on it. I was finally reunited with my mother. She promised me that I will finally earn actual US dollars and buy whatever I want. And I believed her. I wanted so much to believe in America, and I'm sure you felt the same. When you arrived in the US, you were so sure you were going to get a piece of that dream. But your initial optimism was soon replaced with terror when you encountered racism, limited working opportunities, and exploitation in the hands of the white men, the Chinese, and even your fellow Filipinos. Like you, my preconceptions of America were soon shattered. My mother told me of all the debts she incurred just to process my immigration papers. Not to mention that I arrived at a bad time, the start of the recession. I applied for a lot of video production jobs. Most of my interviews did not turn out well. They would say they'd call me back, but they never did. It hurt my pride because everywhere else, there were the real professionals. Tall, qualified, ultimately successful. I used to think I was light-skinned. Now I wasn't white enough. I felt like a half-baked intellectual, a brown monkey trying to talk big. Finally, I resorted to becoming a minimum wage sales associate at Walmart. By this time, winter had come. As a child, I had always dreamed of snow. Now that I actually experienced it, I hated it. Here I was, pushing shopping carts across a warehouse store parking lot on a blistering cold winter day, working to pay the price of living in America. I wished to be strong like you. The more you were pushed away from America, the more you clung on to its edge. When your body became tired of fighting, you strengthened your mind and educated yourself in the English language. Then, you started working for the civil liberties of your people. It seemed nearly impossible. Only when they needed more help in the war effort did America start accepting Filipinos into their fold. Strangely, the war paved the way for the next waves of Filipino immigrants and a new era of closer ties between America and the Filipino people. You died sad, severely ill, and very lonely. And yet, you were also the epitome of America, the self-made, self-educated man. You rose up from the dust to inspire people, even up to today. You inspired me. Because of you, I strengthened my resolve to become a part of America. Eventually, I moved out of my mother's house and changed jobs. I now live comfortably, working at a call center. I play baseball in our company league, taking vacations twice a year. I've forgotten my dreams of making films. I still call my father occasionally, but as each day passes, I feel myself drifting farther and farther away from him. He asks me when I'm going back home. I tell him I'm still saving up, but I'm really afraid to tell him that I already am home. I have come a long way from the fresh off the plane immigrant I once was, and the more I stay here, the more scared I am of living over there again. What would I have waiting for me there? Clean streets? A stable, well-paying job? Personal fulfillment? None of these things. And so I remain here, through the seasons, through the years. I still dread the approach of snow. So this winter, just to humor myself, I went to a Christmas celebration at the Filipino Community Center. I initially regretted coming. I was embarrassed for the participants performing these old-fashioned dances, so ridiculous and outmoded. How was all of this still relevant to one who is nearly American? Then, everyone started singing folk songs. What I first thought of as meaningless now reminded me of what he said once. The voices were so sad, so full of yesterday and the haunting presence of familiar seas, as if they have reached the end of creation. Was this nostalgia I felt? A yearning of things I could never have again? Did I even have these things to begin with? I felt embarrassed at myself for mocking these traditions, for being so cynical. In my search for my America, have I lost my Philippines? I once followed your advice and gave the best that I had so that I can become a part of America. Perhaps I gave too much. I have privileged American ideals in where I work, the way I talk, the things I wear, the movies I watch. Is this where my dream ends then? When my loftiest goal is to be a compliant, middle-class member of this society? Your book used to be a roadmap for my life, but now, after reading and rereading it, I open it up and find the edges not yet filled in. And so I go about looking for this terra incognita, hoping it will one day lead me back home. Home, a concept increasingly difficult to grasp nowadays. Almost 60 years after your death, your countrymen appear to be freer and more mobile than ever. We are now accepted in American culture, not only surviving but thriving. Living here, I was able to start my life all over and become independent. And for that, I am forever grateful for America. But I also realized that up until now, all the things I did for the sake of the dream. I don't think I can reject the dream totally. After all, I'm a product of my past and I can't change what has already happened. But at least now, I see this dream not as an idol to worship and emulate, but as merely a product of human history. Manong, I too have once fallen prey to the trap of diminishing my identity to fit in. Now, I realize that no matter where I am, I will always be Filipino. I will always be a carrier of my heritage, which is not lesser than any other culture. And once again, I have found the desire to write, to document, and ultimately, to change. Thank you for helping me realize all this. Now, I know that my oath-taking into my adopted country will not necessarily mean that I have severed all my ties from our homeland. I don't need to assimilate myself in this country of great diversity. Rather, this new citizenship will be an addition to my identity, one that's ever-changing, ever-growing, every day. The narrative of my life has already been written, but now it's time for me to read it in a different way. It's time for me to read my story in a way that makes me believe in myself again. It's time for me to think of myself not as a Filipino American, but an American Filipino.
Manong.